Does anyone have any questions? Right, let's start with Rowan in the front.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's really informative and interesting to listen to you. Firstly, it's Ascension Day. The Lord is risen, and
Hallelujah.
we used to have a public holiday, but thanks be to God. But I think you've mentioned foreign interest agendas, and I think all these bills, when you look at them, is clearly a very strategic strategy behind this. This doesn't happen by accident, and these things are being forced through. Can you explain a little bit about how these donations work, where up to R500,000 at a time are given to various entities in order to, and then mostly along with the legislation that they now want implemented, come hell or high water. Firstly, how is that not criminal? And given that these are the sorts of actions that are influencing these bills in many instances, how does that not automatically delegitimize the law?
Yeah, just my experience of the years has been that because we've got financial constraints on a number of our departments, so you've got international aid organizations that make donations directly to the departments to promote their own agenda. So you had Planned Parenthood, for example, that was a very big one, was pushing the abortion issues. And I'm sure that Maury and you guys, Christopher and Liesl, would have more knowledge as well of the money that comes in purportedly to help South African government and the departments have all got an agenda. They've all got strings attached to it. And I think that is the concern. And I think, Maury, when you did the comprehensive sexuality issue, touch on that with the publication of those booklets that were sponsored by international funding.
Yeah, I think my bit would be to add the two cases, and the detail is vague to me now. I want to say almost it is the BELA Bill march today that has had some effect on me remembering, but the details is a bit sketchy for me right now to definitively put it down. But with the comprehensive sexuality education, we know that the department had several what they call stakeholders, not only sponsoring the material and the design and creation of the booklets. We also know that, for instance, when we engage SAPRA around the vaccinations, one of the key things that the committee actually asked, this is now the Committee of Health, was to ask what donations the department has received, for instance, from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, and how that influences them in how they advance or speak on any matter. Can you actually say you're independent and that you are not influenced by any of your donors? And actually it was a question that the EFF, Naledi Chirwa, raised very well a few times to say, can you tell us where the money comes from? Because there was a 20 million rand that was given. And now, when you receive all that money, can you truly say that you are going to, whose interest are you going to look after? Is it the interest of the people, or is it the interest of the ones that you give money to? And I think for South Africans, I should say that what we are needing to really investigate or assess as we go for voting is to say, what drives political parties? What in the last 30 years has a political party shown me? Is it the interest of South African, of me as a citizen? And how does that show up if they have my interest at heart? Is under the tree. Is meaning, do they engage with me? Do they consult with me? Do they consider my views? And it's got to do with the constituency work. I'm maybe going a little bit further down the path, but the aspect of self-interest has to do with money, and it has to do with how political parties conduct themselves and government conducts itself. So yes, I would say donations that we see on budget lines, those things are important for people to consider. Who gives money for what?
Thank you. I would just add, I think it'd be a very worthwhile exercise to follow the money, as people say, to see where it comes from. And it's not just with, policies and legislation. With the World Health Organization, there's a lot of questions about where the World Health Organization gets their money from, and whether it is whoever the entity is, whether it's a government department or something like that organization, and whose interests are they acting, or is it kind of like being for sale in a sense? You don't want that, yes, that is with, for example, this ECE Toolkit was developed by a 40 million rand grant from a Belgian organization, VVOP, done in conjunction with the department and the University of Stellenbosch, but overseas money. So that is something that you pick up when you look at these things.
Excellent example.
Let me give some positive news, because the money doesn't always flow the wrong way.
Yes.
And so what's very interesting in the education sector in Africa is that one of the consequences of let's say the first generation of liberation education is that a vast number of Africans got to kind of get a sense of what is good education. Often that had to do with kind of a legacy that was there. When that legacy disappeared in a lot of government schools, and I'm not just talking about South Africa, this is an African issue from here all the way to Kenya and to Nigeria and across, people started saying, you know what, this isn't good, this is not good for my kids. I want to give my kids an independent education. And the World Bank has actually been very supportive of that. In terms of looking at how do we create independent education in Africa, because quite frankly, that's what Africans want. And it's amazing, Africans are willing to make huge personal sacrifices in order to secure an independent education for South Africa. One of the problems is there are not enough academic and civil society organizations to work with the World Bank. And that World Bank investment has been progressively rolled back by people who want to see state education. So it's not always the issue that there is not money for these things. It's often, or for things that are good, because there's very obvious scientific evidence to support the value of independent education. It's the lack of organizations, and then once again, the lack of political parties to say, no, we're gonna fight on this ground, and we're gonna fight on this issue. So with the money flows, as Liesl said, follow the money. Always follow the money, but also don't become despondent, because I think at the end of the day, the money follows what is effective. If there are people to say, this is effective, that's an ineffective way of spending the money.
Okay, so keep the mic. Let me ask you a question. You've spoken about organizations and normal people getting involved more with getting these organizations together. I'm sitting here going, well, as a normal person on the street, what do I have to do? How easy is it for me to get a group of people together and create an organization that's legitimate that then can get funding? How do we go about doing this?
I mean, I think you asked the $60 billion question.
Because a lot of us think it's out of reach. We can't just start an organization,
I think I think it is difficult, and it's difficult and it's easy. I think what you've got to do is, and it is difficult, but what you've got to do is you've got to find people who I think first are willing to put more in than they're going to take out. That's the first important starting step. It's, I think, to find people it's to have very sound, well worked out principles that attract people. And then it's also about being pragmatic, because no organization is perfect, no political party is perfect, and this affects how people vote. People say, Steve is this or whatever, I'm not picking on Steve, but no one's perfect. You wouldn't go, the party you vote for, it's like saying, South Africans have got this like weird duality about politics, right? First, we all hate politicians, but we all talk about politics all the time. And then, but at the same time, we hate politicians, but we expect them to be the Messiah. And the problem there is that you'd go to work, even if the guy at work is lazy and is not the greatest guy to work with.
Yeah.
You go to work, even if the guy next door to you has BO. But the problem is that we judge political parties like, oh no, I'm not going to vote this time around because of this or that, or the party's not perfect. No party is perfect, just like no workplace is perfect. If you're not going to vote, if you're not going to support a party that's got warts, then what I want to suggest to you is don't go to work tomorrow if the guy has BO, the guy next to you has BO. Don't do it. See how long that works for you.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Identify yourself, please.
Right. Really smart.
Oh, I know you.
My question is, would you say that it is very good news for us as Christians in South Africa, bearing in mind that there are 75% of us, if you ask to identify yourself what your faith is, it's Christian, that having a representative in Parliament can actually, in this next election, which is our 7th election, give us a brand new opportunity to vote for our values this time. Because you've seen for 30 years now it hasn't worked, voting the way we have, but we don't need a strong opposition in my eye. We need a brand new government. So if we're sitting with 75% of the population, surely it's not rocket science that maybe it would be very good news for all of us to get the word out in the next 20 days to all our Christian friends, our churches, etc., to get behind a vehicle that represents our Christian values. And there is somebody that represents our Christian values in Parliament since 1994. So, do you think this would be a good idea? That's my question.
Vaughan, can I just say that what is very interesting with this election, it's probably one of the most critical elections ever. When it comes to the smaller growing parties, like the Freedom Front Plus, like the ACDP, people love us, but they say, we must vote for the bigger parties. Western Cape, we've got to vote for the DA to keep the ANC out. This election, with the multi-party charter, I think gives you the opportunity to vote for your values, to vote for your Christian values, in the knowledge that the parties are working together. And without Vaughan pushing a political party too much, but it is the opportunity to vote for the ACDP in the knowledge that we are working in a multi-party charter where your values will be protected.
Yeah.
And I think that is critical. And with a proven track record of what we shared tonight, and that we have co-governed with those parties in the metros. So I think it is the first time that that message can resonate with the majority of Christians that would normally, voters are very fickle. They'll wake up in the morning and say, who should I vote for? But here, but it does give you the opportunity to realize, once you've listened, and this would be my appeal to listeners tonight, to realize the threat to our Judeo-Christian values that we've all illustrated tonight. And that it is critical for us to vote with your values, your Judeo-Christian values. And even if you still have a sense of fear, no, we've got to vote, you now know that we are working in a multi-party charter. And I think it is a win-win situation.
Anyone else? Liesl?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. People sometimes ask us about public participation and, voting. And then I say to them, public participation is not voting once every 4 years or so.
Yeah.
Voting is the least you can do. It starts there. It starts being involved. It starts with knowing what's going on. And I know everybody's not going to sit and watch Parliament or read the Hansard or something like that. But there are people that you can follow, organisations such as ourselves if you're interested in religious freedoms, other organisations if you're interested in other sorts of democratic rights. to see what's going on, so that you can cast that vote for your values. I think that's a very good catchphrase, vote for your values, because it's not just about you, it's about, Christians say, you need to love your neighbor. And it's, now I'm not speaking as Forrest, I'm speaking in a personal capacity, because Forrest is faith neutral, but speaking in a personal capacity, going out and voting according to your values is a way that you can love your neighbor in this country, because it's a way that you can help ensure that those who promote those values that you believe are in the best interest of yourself and your children and your community and others, it's not just about you, it's about everyone, it can promote that. So that's really, it really is important. And now back to my 4SA hat, we've looked at the bills that came through Parliament, and we have a scorecard of how different political parties engage with bills on freedom of religious issues. And we also have a scorecard of how the government departments dealt with freedom of religion issues, because many of these documents, as they are being developed in government departments, as was correctly pointed out, the executive, the government departments, they don't have a very good public participation process often. Department of Home Affairs did very well, with their marriage law reform policy, so, give credit where it's due. But some other departments really did very poorly. So that's also interesting reading for somebody who is interested in, what's happening where, and are these departments, are they actually upholding religious freedom? Just because, well, that's our specific focus, but what are they actually doing?
Sorry, just a quick word, from an apolitical perspective, a party political perspective, if I'm allowed to say that. But I think there's two important things to know, which is one, that South Africa, this election is very important because we're going through a fundamental transition. We had essentially, while the Constitution was changed a long time ago, and people to my left are involved in that, we have a proportional representation constitution, and it gets a lot of kind of flack on one level. But the issue is we were still thinking as if we were in a Westminster system. So politics takes a very long time, your political culture takes a very long time. We were thinking Westminster system while living in a proportional representation constitution. And there's one thing that I can say. In a proportional representation system, small, focused, united parties have a huge, outsize impact.
It's true.
And you may disagree with them, you may like them, you may not like them. I'm making a political science observation. Look at the role of the ultra-Orthodox religious parties in Israel. They, up until very recently, over many, many years, have been able to get their people out of military conscription. It's one of the most fundamental constituencies of one of the most fundamental capabilities of a state. Even the most libertarian people say, well, if the state gets attacked, then we need people to go out and fight. But the ultra-Orthodox religious parties in Israel have been able to keep, to certain degrees, and there's qualifications, but being able to keep people out even of the military in a state like Israel. It tells you about the outsized role that political parties, the small, focused political parties have. I've come down from Gauteng. I don't even know what party my mayor belongs to, the mayor of Joburg, okay? I know he's got something between 8 and 10 bodyguards, but I don't know the name of his party, okay?
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know, but the point is that is the example, that's a living example of the power of small political parties in coalitions, but in proportional representation government systems. And I think the second point is, and I think it's a very valid point to say vote your values, but the problem is everyone says vote your values. I think what you've got to do is you've got to say, how does your party, in practical policy terms, put those values into action?
Yeah.
So when you've got however many days, you've got 20 or so days, find out how the party that you intend voting for is going to put your values into practical policy, practical planned policy. How is that going to happen? And that is a key, I think that's the key term, because everyone can say, it's, just vote your values, and I think it's an important point, but the point is find out how those values are going to be put into action.
Yeah, I think I want to underline that, because I think one of the key things that we as the ACDP certainly, and I will say that, obviously there's a bias, is that in 30 years, organizations, because I come from an organizational change background, organizations grow in cycles. And one of the things that we can pride ourselves on is that the concept, the inception of the ACDP was based on defending and standing for the Christian worldview and for the biblical transformation of South Africa based on those principles. That was the idea. But it takes time for an organization to develop the kind of leadership and capacity for them to develop the idea into policy and legislation, and for them to have that capability. And that's why I want to emphasize what Christopher's just said. It is okay for people to get the catchphrase or the essence of vote your values, but it is very important to understand that, especially in the South African context, that we are not in 1994 where an idea is being sold to you. We are now at the place in our democracy where we need governance that will be reflective of the people, and at the same time the capability to bring about the next phase for South Africa. Because what we have seen now in the desperation, it's a good thing, but there should be caution as well. The good thing is the sense of entrepreneurial politics, almost, if that's such a phrase, where you have a lot of parties coming and people putting their hand up. Because South Africans are not passive. We are not people who's going to roll out and die. We just have it in our DNA that if something is wrong, we will fix it, and we will get up. If you put us down, we will get up. So what we've seen is failure in 30 years, and people are putting their hands up left, right, and center and saying, me to the electorate. But it is important for the electorate to understand that you need organizations that has the capability, that reflects what it is that you want to see. Because what we have spoken of tonight here with you is to say, you need to understand that policy, legislation, underneath all of it is the ideology of whomever is standing in government. And you need to ask, the people that I am thinking about, what is their worldview? We know what the worldview of the African National Congress is. And we know what the worldview is. And if I may say lastly, the African National Congress was founded on Christian principles of justice. It is not the same organization anymore. No way. This is not Albert Luthuli, Charlotte Maxeke. No. This is a communist, Marxist, it's political, are you going to be in trouble?
No.
But I mean, this is the ideology. This is the ideology that underpins it, And I absolutely want to stress this to South Africans, is that we can no longer look at South Africa within the context of the past, which is color and history.
Yeah.
Meaning, I vote because I never ever want to be governed by a white man again. Or I'm voting because I'm looking for somebody that looks like me. Okay, same color as me. No, we cannot afford it. 30 years of politics has brought us here, where we have voted on liberation theology. It is now time for us to vote in accordance to how we want the country to see. And truly lastly, the African Christian Democratic Party is the only party that can truly stand up and say that we are a multiracial party, that are not on the basis of any race putting it out. Why is that important? It is important because our country is polarized, divided, and the kind of politics that is being presented is one that is not visionary, it's not futuristic. We need politicians that are thinking about the people of this country and not about the narrative that will save us another round in government.
Yeah, the Association of Christian Media has put out a very good campaign called Vote Your Values. So they're a little bit ahead of the curve, which I'm very happy about. But here's the problem with 80% Christian in South Africa. We're 80% Christian on a Sunday. And we talk about our values very often. And I think what we're hearing here is what we're trying to say is, where's the practicality? Where is the Monday to Saturday or the everyday going out and being practical about your values? We are missing that. You know, we live in a world where you can get up, and I like to use Tyson Fury as an example. Not in his last fight against Francis Ngannou, who was an ex-UFC fighter, and he almost got beaten, but in his last title fight, and I love playing this video for Christians because it shows you exactly how shallow Christianity has become with not practically living out our values and living out our worldview according to biblical principles. Tyson Fury, at the end of his last fight that he won to retain the world title in boxing, said, "I just want to thank my Savior, Lord, and Jesus Christ for everything He has done for me, for helping me to get through this fight and win this title." And 3 minutes later, he was swearing like a trooper, telling everyone how he's taking all his boys out and they're going to go out and have a night in the town and have a party and go absolutely crazy. What kind of a message are you sending there? And this is where I say, people say, but Vaughan, 80% Christian. Yes, 80% that Christian. It's not 80% worldview, biblical principle Christian. And I'm going to say ACDP now. Because these guys, and I'm not pro ACDP. I've got a lot of friends in the ACDP, and they are all quality people. There might be few of them, but even the guys that I know from eThekwini, I'm very good friends with Jamal Isop. We've sweated blood in the communities together. Pastor Wayne, besides being deputy president of the ACDP, we've sweated blood together in the Indian communities and in the coloured communities in Durban, because we care. Because we practically want to be there for people. You want to hear the heart of the ACDP, and I'm not promoting my own content here, but go and listen to the 2-hour discussion me and Pastor Wayne had on the couch downstairs, where we just chatted off the cuff on camera for 2 hours. I was shocked what that man had to say to me, because I didn't realize how much of a man of integrity he really, really is. He's an amazing human being. Forget about being deputy president of the ACDP. And the ACDP is full of these people. There might be few of them, but this is why they have such an impact. And I'm not going to say ACDP again. Let's see, we're going to go, well, maybe 1 or 2 more questions, because I know we've been going on for a long time. I don't want to keep everyone up past 12. We might all turn into pumpkins. Any more questions? Yes, sir, at the back there.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for this wonderful platform. And I just want to ask, because people ask us this question, and I think I need to ask it to the honourable members of the Parliament. Is the multi-charter, is it a coalition, or is it just an agreement on certain issues, but is it a set of principles?
Coalition, just an agreement.
So it's important to note that the concept of coalition governments has been around a long time, okay? And we are entering into that realm now, where all polls are indicating that the ANC is going to be below 40%. So it is a reality. At local government level, we have had multi-party governments, or coalition governments have been in existence. The ACDP, the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, COPE have been part of those, and we've taken control very effectively of running those coalitions. But when you have an unstable partner, that person will hop from one to the next, whoever can offer them the most. And in Johannesburg, you've got the situation where the 2 big parties, the ANC and the EFF, can't abide each other. Now they've appointed a non-entity who's now the mayor of our financial capital. It's a disaster. So the multi-party charter is a framework agreement setting out policy and rules for post-elections to set up a coalition government should the need arise. It's not a coalition government now. It is setting out what would be the framework for the discussions, what would be our policies. So there's been a lot of discussion around policies, there's been a lot of discussions, because you don't want to sit on the first day after the elections, now you've got to sort out where are we in agreement. So it is a framework agreement, it is not a coalition at this point. It is looking towards forming a coalition government. At the same time, we are in coalition governments at local government level. Those are operating at the moment, okay? That's practically. But it is setting out the framework. And I think one of the things we're going to have to move to in the country is to have legislation governing coalition governments. Because you cannot have people, and a coalition agreement is not legally enforceable. It's almost like a gentleman's agreement. Yeah. Well, it's not even often for gentlemen, because as soon as you get a better offer, you hop to the other side. But I was in Kenya and I was very impressed with their statutory regulations, pre-election and post-election coalition legislation. And I was in Germany, where we studied as leaders in the nation. We went, all the top parties, right, we all went to Germany to study coalition governments. They got a well-established coalition governments there. Their public sector, their civil servants help the political parties formulate the coalition agreements. And they ensure that every party that is part of the coalition government has parts of their manifesto included. So I think this is something that we're looking towards. But at this stage, we are all contesting separately. But you would have seen the multi-party charter, I think last week had a meeting where we were all represented, and we set out our policy on social development at the SASSA offices that are absolutely in an appalling state, and said this is how we're going to improve it. So that is why it's so important for you to understand that at this stage it is not a formal coalition, it is a framework agreement, but it is such a win-win situation when you are speaking, particularly here in the Western Cape, to voters to say, here you can vote for your Christian values in the knowledge that we are part of a multi-party, multi-party framework, charter, that we will work together after the elections. And I think that gives you an idea. So I hope that clarifies that there is an agreement, but it is not a coalition agreement, because then you've got to set out who gets what positions and that type of thing. And the last point I wanted to make on that is what we learned in Germany is, firstly, those people that could benefit from a coalition agreement should not participate in the negotiations. So you've got Joburg, the guy should not, he's the mayor. And you never push for positions, you push for the common good of the people.
Yeah.
Whereas in South Africa, it's all about what can I get?
Yeah.
What position can I get? And I think this is something that we need to learn from established governments of coalitions. Israel is a wonderful example of, they've always had coalitions, and they often have in elections, and it shows you the impact that a small party can have in such. You can become the kingmaker. And the ACDP was the kingmaker in the Western Cape, where they needed our one seat to pass the Western Cape Constitution, the provincial constitution. We needed one seat, and we were able to promote a number of values there in an informal agreement to vote together to pass a provincial constitution. So I hope that helps you understand that. It's a very important message to pass out to the electorate at this stage. Thank you, Vaughan.
Okay, so I think we're going to leave it there because we have gone on for a long time, except we're just going to let Christopher start off, leave his lasting impressions with you, and then we'll let Liesl and Mari say something. Don't think Steve needs to say anything. No, I'm just teasing.
No, I've said enough.
Everyone's picking on Steve tonight.
Sorry, I just wanted to answer. I will make my closing comment just an answer to Honourable Sukers' question about the penalty clause in the BELA Bill. Now, I see that the UN's not that popular, but let me say that our government picks and chooses what comes out of the UN. UNESCO did a very intensive study in what is the effect of putting legal penalties on creating truancy laws. So truancy is an American term, is probably where if you don't go to school, they're going to make some law to force people to go to school. And we're going to penalize parents through fines, through jail, through any of those. UNESCO's research showed that when you do that, you actually make school attendance worse. And this was actually made clear to the committee. It was made clear to the committee in a legal opinion. It was made clear to the committee in a criminological opinion. A lot of people made submissions and said, guys, look, if you make it a penalty, you make it worse. And it's not illogical, because if you say to me, if you are keeping your child out of school, I'm going to come and hunt you down. You know what's the first thing I do? Is I go and hide that child away. And I'm less likely to comply. What was needed there was, what's needed, and this is, it's a shocking example in the Act. And it was pushed through in a way that I thought was, I can only use this word, you use many Afrikaans words, kragdadig. It was like there was this kragdadige attitude, which was like, round up these ridiculous parents who are doing this, without compassion, without saying, this is a social problem that needs social solutions, that ignored the science on the issue. And that came from UNESCO. So that, I think, hopefully that just answers what you asked. And it's actually, it's just one of the parts of the BELA Bill that I'm just gobsmacked about how bad that particular part is, and from a country that claims to be progressive. And we go for this kind of, literally put the stormtroopers out there to grab the kids kind of approach, which does not work. And we should be using social mechanisms, and we should be using mechanisms like the Children's Court to, because the Children's Court can then assist and bring all these social partners into play and say, okay, let's create a parenting plan, let's get this family into a house, and then we can start worrying about why the kids are not in school.
Lasting impressions.
I think my general takeaway from all of this is that in a country that has this constitution that talks about diversity and protecting diversity, we see trends that true diversity is actually being undermined. If you want to present one worldview in education to the exclusion or marginalization of others, if you create laws that if somebody's just in a loving, legitimate way express their worldview, their religion, and what they feel about things, there's a chance that they might be prosecuted, and that might lead to self-censorship. It's a chilling of democracy. It's a chilling of freedom. My one colleague says that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and I think South Africans need to really, I don't want to say wake up because it sounds a bit harsh, but we need to be awake. We need to be awake, and we need to participate, because we have rights. But with a right, you always have a corresponding responsibility, and we need to exercise our rights. Otherwise, we risk losing our rights, and we risk it being watered down. And I think in this country, in our history, we know that active public participation and civic society can push back against horrendous things. And we need that again. We need that strong, that where the power is really with the people and really reflects the true diversity of our nation, so that there is a place where everybody is welcome, and nobody needs to be silenced because they have a particular view. And that includes, the views of the religious community that is, even though apparently we're 80% Christian, the religious views are kind of being marginalized at the moment. We want true diversity where everybody has their space, but that is something that we will contend for. It's not something that you can just sit idly by and think it's going to still be there in 5 years if you don't make a stand for it, because it's something that is important and that is valuable, and it is worth protecting.
My comments is going to be part reflection and part what I think we really need to pay attention to as citizens and as South Africans, whether we're politicians or not. The one is that I was in Queenstown with the BELA Bill when I had just one moment. It was at a very contentious time where it became very clear to the governing party that this is not going to be a walk in the park. And because absolutely we mobilized our communities, and especially Christians and people of faith, to come up against this legislation. And I was in a moment sitting by myself in Queenstown because things has become so contentious that, like Steve said, the members of the majority party really didn't want to see me, and literally I had people, attacking me in public hearings, it is totally actually strange for that to happen.
It's not allowed. And
it's not allowed, but they allowed it. And I was sitting outside, and I was sitting by myself, and the whole committee, obviously, on that side. I'm like the child that is out of the being put out of the schoolyard. And as I was sitting there, I was contemplating, and I was really the weight of where we at as a nation. It was in that moment where really the responsibility for us as political leaders, as Christian politicians, as well as churches and spiritual leaders and communities, to truly understand where we at in the nation really dawned on me. But as I was sitting there, from the side there was a car stopped, and I just see on my left just this line of union members, ANC supporters, EFF, and I'm thinking, God, I'm outnumbered here today. And in fact, they were absolutely certain that I'm outnumbered, because one of the members came to me and says, "Vandag kry jy pakkies so Sukers." So I was sitting there, and and just on the side, a bakkie stopped, and a mother and a father got out, and a young little girl with a piece of paper in her hand. And as they got out, the family, I immediately knew this is the homeschoolers that are coming. But as they were coming towards me, they were coming towards me, in my heart I knew that this is the crucible for South Africa, where the values that will hold this country and define the future, this is this moment, So they walked up to me, and she came because she wants to give me something. What it meant to me was, we are fighting for the identity of a nation. And what I want to stress tonight, in everything that we have spoken about, is we as a nation need to reflect to the values that has taken us through one of the worst systems that you can think of, apartheid. And I come from a community that suffered that. And we lived under poverty. But there's one thing that has preserved us, and that is the values of Christianity, the Christian worldview. South Africa is going into its next phase. Everything points towards darkness. But we know that the darkness cannot overcome the light. And it is so important for Christians of every denomination, regardless whether you're Catholic or Presbyterian, Methodist or whoever, but that we absolutely understand that what is at play is identity. And values, convictions and beliefs and worldview has to do with identity. So my message to South Africa really is, this nation is not going to go under. It is not another Zimbabwe. We have the decision in our hands, just like the Israelites did when God said to them, go through the Jordan. Joshua turned to them, and there he makes a covenant with God again. And he says to them, you make a decision today who you are going to serve. But me and my house, we are going to serve the Lord. And we are right there at the River Jordan, where South Africa needs to decide. And the future depends on the decisions that we make on the 29th of May.
Sure, that's good. So just to end off for the next half an hour, I think just reflecting on what you've heard tonight, and I would really also appeal the listeners that are listening to this show on Christian media, whatever, our nation is in a critical state when it comes to our moral fiber, and it is an attack on our children, on the next generation, from an evil ideology. And that is what we've heard tonight as we've been fighting and this battle, the BELA battle, the decriminalisation of prostitution, the World Health Organization. It is an agenda against the next generation.
Yeah.
And it is so important. Today in Parliament, it was the ACDP that wished everyone a happy Ascension Day. Let us remember the Ascension Day. So whilst it is very important to say vote your values, it's at the same time important what has been your track record for the last 30 years. And I think that is so key. And today I spoke in Parliament about the code of ethics for members of Parliament, how you should conduct yourself. That's disgraceful. Surely, an elected representative should know how to conduct themselves. That they are honest, that they are people of integrity, that they will put the common interest ahead of their own interests, that they will not be selfish, greedy. And the Bible shows us what type of elected officials we should have. In Exodus 18 verse 21, but select capable men. It doesn't say select capable they. Select capable men, and let's say women.
Yes.
From all the people, men and women who fear God, trustworthy, who hate dishonest gain. And as I said in Parliament today, the ACDP stands for those values of servant leadership and understands stewardship of state resources. But what our listeners have heard tonight is Maurice Sukers that has fought this battle, and Liesl and Christopher that are fighting this battle. But we've got the opportunity on the 29th of May to stand up for our Judeo-Christian principles and vote for those that have been fighting for the last 30 years and have had a measure of success. But as Isaiah tells us, where the nation is crying out to leaders, and Israel was in a desperate time and cried out to the watchman on the wall and said, "Watchman, what do you see?" And the watchman responded. It's repeated. "Watchman, what of the night?" All they could see was night. And the watchman said, "The morning comes. The morning comes." But also the night. So not denying the challenges. But we know the morning is here and the morning is coming. And Jesus is the morning star. But as we stand for our Judeo-Christian values, we will ensure that the morning comes and the darkness is dissipated and removed. And so that is what I would like to thank. And I'd like to honor everyone that's here. And thank you, Vaughan, for allowing us to share these concepts. And it is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. And we as watchmen on the wall that are seeing this, all of us here, are alerting the public. This is a critical time in our nation. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to end off by saying this. We need to start doing what Jesus said in order to complete the law. If we are not willing to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters, there is something wrong. If we are not willing to love like you want people to love you, And you must understand these two principles, if you just understand what that means fully, the concept, everything will change. You'll be willing to do everything and anything to build a better country and a better life for the person sitting next to you, not for yourself. So I'm not going to say vote for the ACDP. I'm going to say look at the politicians, look at the people who are in charge, from government to provincial to your municipalities to your local ward councillors. Look at them and ask yourself the question, are they willing to lay down their life for me? Or are they willing to lie on a fat couch full of money? Are they willing to love unconditionally? Or is there something else at play there? If those two principles aren't adhered to, then you need to seriously consider who you're looking up to, who you are supporting, and who you are voting for. So thank you guys for coming tonight. I really appreciate you sitting through all of this. Thank you, Liesl. Thank you, Maury. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Steve. I don't know how all these guys got here tonight, but I'm very happy that even Maury was double booked and we had to sort something out and move an entire community meeting so she could be here tonight, which was great. They really took time out to come here and speak to you guys, and obviously to create this content that we are going to create and put it out onto all the social platforms. So guys, for participating, thank you guys very much. And again, for the panel, let's give them one last round of applause. And like they would say, not because they're great people, they're great servants. They are great servants. Thank you guys.